This would, according to this theory, show an increase in performance, as working in this zone would mean working within optimum levels of arousal, which, as we know, is where performance is best. Therefore, in terms of this theory, Nick would have to lower his levels of anxiety that we know is currently high in order to play within this zone and overall increase performance. Therefore, as Nick's levels of arousal and anxiety are most likely towards this side of the graph, he would need to reduce them to either moderate or low in order to find his correct zone of optimum levels, and therefore, in terms of this theory and his sporting event, perform maximally. Somatic and cognitive strategies for performers to control stress, anxiety, and arousal. Firstly, one somatic technique sporting performers can use in order to help control stress, anxiety, and arousal levels when too high would be breathing control. This particular technique involves diaphragmatic breathing as a means of focusing on relaxation. This would therefore help to reduce these somatic symptoms that occur when stress, anxiety, and arousal levels are high and present. These symptoms can range from increased heart rate to feeling sick. This particular technique could therefore benefit Nick in scenario 1, as he feels sick before games, and performing this technique could help to control his levels of stress, anxiety, and arousal when they are too high, and overall could help increase performance. On the other hand, one cognitive strategy that can be used in order to help control when stress, anxiety, and arousal levels become too high would be visualization. This is the process of creating a mental image of what you want to happen or feel. This can therefore reduce these symptoms when cognitive levels of stress, anxiety, and arousal are too high, such as worry and negative thoughts. In terms of Nick, this would be relevant, as it is clear he has high levels of these factors and often worries and thinks negatively during and before matches. Therefore, performing this particular technique could help to control these high levels of stress, arousal, and anxiety, and overall could most importantly benefit and improve his overall performance. Moving on to Scenario 2. Scenario 2, stress. In terms of stress in Scenario 2, we can see Rachel completely contrasts this form of stress known as distress that is shown by Nick before and during games. Rachel presents us with another type of stress known as eustress. This eustress is a type of good stress and is a positive reaction of a performer to stress, leading to optimal arousal, which, as we know, will cause maximal performance once working within optimal arousal. Eustress can help motivate and engage a player, as well as helping them to concentrate and focus better. As you can see in the graph above, eustress is where performance is at its highest, and this not only helps a person to work at optimum levels of arousal, but also helps them to positively react in terms of the stress process earlier discussed. This is by, instead of perceiving the sporting demand in a negative way as a threat like we see Nick do in Scenario 1 and Sarah do in Scenario 2, which causes distress, Rachel will see this demand in a positive way in the form of a challenge, and therefore causes eustress to be present and allow optimal levels of arousal and maximal performance. It is clear in terms of Scenario 2 that Rachel experiences eustress during games, whereas Sarah is experiencing distress in big games. This is due to the fact that the scenario states that Rachel thrives on the atmosphere and receives many Player of the Match awards. This therefore clearly shows us that Rachel is experiencing eustress during these games, as she is performing to the best of her ability, as well as thriving with the pressure and receiving rewards like Player of the Game in order to reinforce this high performance. On the other hand, it is clear that Sarah, similarly to Nick in Scenario 1, is experiencing distress. This is clear as the scenario states that Sarah appears to fail in these high-pressure important games, whereas in other less important games or training she will perform well. A contributing factor and reason for this would be she is experiencing distress in these important games. As the graph above shows, this will cause a decrease in performance and shows she has too high levels of stress when the game means more and the bigger crowd is watching her. It is clear Sarah does not thrive in this environment like Rachel does, and a key factor towards this is the fact that they are both experiencing different types of stress before and during these big games. Sarah, in this scenario, displays some symptoms of cognitive stress factors earlier discussed. For example, it is clear that in these big games Sarah struggles to concentrate. This is a symptom of somatic stress, as well as loss of confidence, which also appears to occur when Sarah takes part in these bigger games with larger crowds. We can see Sarah loses confidence and doubts herself more in these big games, as in training sessions and local games with smaller crowds. We can see a dramatic increase in her performance. This means that when playing in these particular games, her levels of stress would be lower, and therefore in terms of the graph, this would see her performance increase, which shows she is playing with more confidence and without these cognitive factors that we see present when she plays in these crunch games. As well as this, despite the scenario not mentioning this, it is also likely that somatic stress factors are also present before and during her performance of these more important games. Some of these can consist of increased heart rate, sweaty palms, feeling nauseous, and more. In terms of stressors and the causes of stress, there are many factors that can contribute to influencing levels of a person's stress. All these particular influences fall under 5 main categories. These consist of personal and lifestyle, sports environment, occupational, internal, and external. These are the main categories that specific factors fall under when determining causes of stress. For example, things such as family, social disapproval, and isolation are all factors that fall under personal and lifestyle, such as causes of stress. Moving on. Specific causes of stress that fall under the sports environment can consist of things like conflict, audience, pressure, and more. In terms of Sarah, these factors could apply to her as causes of her stress in sport as she deals with conflict in terms of other players on her team becoming frustrated and not being supportive of her poor performance in these big games. In addition, audience and pressure may also be a contributing factor to Sarah's stress in these big games, as she struggles to play well in these games that have bigger audience and more pressure than others, meaning these causes of stress could also be relevant in terms of Sarah. Some occupational causes of stress would be related to job, if a coach, or pressure to win. Some internal causes of stress could be lack of sleep, injury, and also perception of ability. Finally, some external causes of stress could consist of major life events such as death in family, relationship problems or work, as well as things like the weather on the day or the surrounding noise. These are all factors that can contribute to causing levels of stress to increase. Some of these factors could also be relevant to Nick from scenario 1, as well as Sarah in this scenario, who shares some of the causes of stress mentioned.